Hey guys, welcome back to the Oldest Magic. I hope the new year is treating you guys well. And forgive me if I seem a little bit out of sorts, but I'm just getting over a really bad cold, so bear with me. But I just wanted to come on here and I wanted to briefly talk about the power of insight. I'm a big believer in this idea of insight, self knowledge, gnosis. Different people call it different things, right? But in my own personal life, I have found that you can't really get anywhere without insight into yourself, insight into other people, insight into the world in general. And so, what is insight in this kind of context? Well, for me personally, it's kind of a deeper awareness. Wherever that focus of that awareness is, it's about depth of perception. And so, this power of insight, I think, is really the only true path that we can take towards self knowledge and satisfaction. That's in a personal context, that's in a religious context, that's in a familial context, that's in the context of love and romance, whatever. When I was younger, I spent a lot of time studying the work of the psychologist Carl Jung and this idea that what you don't make conscious, what you don't draw up from the unconscious into the conscious mind will essentially control you as fate, as your enslavement or your addiction to unconscious impulses, right? And I think this is profoundly true. And in my experience, the times in my life when I have really grown and when I've really learned things has been when I've been able to cultivate this kind of insight into how I interact with the world and how the world interacts with me. And I think that's an important thing to think about. And so I wanted to come on here and I wanted to discuss that with you guys, right? I think a lot of the time we fail in insight around two key factors, and that's our pleasure and our pain. So, yeah, our pleasure and our pain. And so what I want to say about that is obviously it makes sense, right? What can short circuit our reason and our ability to think logically or to intuit and feel with any kind of real attunement? Because there are two ways of two modes of discourse with the world, right? You've got the more masculine way of looking at the world, which is reason and logic and facts and very structured and rigorous and sort of cold and objective, right? I mean, for the sake of brevity, let's go with that. These terms and analogies and ideas they're not literal. They are just sort of ways for us to use language in a way that allows us to kind of make sense of the insensible, right? Or to understand a profoundly complex world. So you have this kind of more masculine way of looking at things, and then you have a more feminine way of looking at things, which is more feeling based, which is more emotional, which is more intuitive, which is more contextual, which is more relational. And both have their place in the human mind, right? You can't be a very balanced person if you don't have both modes of functioning and modes of awareness, right? So in terms of our pleasure and our pain, if we're not really sort of in the most positive and the most actualized, the most beneficial forms of those awarenesses, if our reason isn't bright and shining, if our intuition and our emotion and our feeling centers aren't kind of bright and shining, then we're going to fall into the shadow, right? We're going to sort of lapse into unconscious impulses, and we are going to become very, very quickly enslaved by our pleasure or our pain. And so let's think about pleasure for a second in terms of insight. How do we often become entrapped by our pleasure? And as a result, have a lack of insight, right? That's in terms of our addictions, Many of us are kind of governed or addicted to dopamine these days, right? That can come in the form of food, sex, how we fuck is a big thing, right? Sex rules everything in this culture, in this world, right? And so how we're socialized, what we find attractive, what we think of our own sense of vitality, how we are as lovers, like literally how we fuck. Like, are we more dominant? Are we more submissive? Are we a combination of both? Where are our strengths? Where are our weaknesses? All these things are important contextual qualifiers that allow us to be more or less aware. And when we're less aware, when we're kind of enslaved by our sexual impulses, when we are we don't quite realize why we keep making the same mistakes or why we're attracted to the same kinds of people again and again and again, because we either don't want to do the work or we don't know how to do the work to sort of draw that unconscious psychic material up into our conscious awareness, so it could be like, okay, these are some of the reasons and these are some of the struggles and terrains that I'm dealing with. If we can't do that, we're cooked, right? We're just going to keep falling into the same habitual patterns over and over and over again. So that's one thing, right? It's like sex is a big thing. It's also addiction. So like, whatever our addictions might be, that could be food, that could be alcohol, that could be various forms of drug abuse, right? It could be, we could even just be addicted to certain emotional rhythms and patterns with various people. It doesn't even have to be in a sexual context. It could be familial patterns, right? Perhaps you had a really dark, bad relationship with your father or with your mother, and you are constantly replicating the light and dark of those relationships, right? You're seeking comfort in the way you sought comfort with your father, for example. And you're also addicted to the shadow side of that. You expect it. It's like, well, better the devil I know than the devil I don't, right? And in these ways, this is kind of how we start to lose clarity. We start to lose self-awareness, and we don't really know what the fuck is happening within us, why we're governed by things, and how. And so, obviously, I mentioned earlier masculine and feminine polarities and how sex governs us, and I use a word like fuck because it's so raw, it's so explicit, and it's so honest. Because we are in our lives craving authenticity. The thing is that we sometimes don't really know what is authentic. We have second and third and fourth hand accounts of what's authentic. So in a lot of ways, our sexuality, the things we consume, the way we fuck, the way we're fucked by other people, the way we love, the way we care for each other, all these things, from the very gentle and very subtle and very implicate to the very explicit ways and modes of being. Sometimes these aren't our ways and modes of being. They are second and third hand versions of ourselves that have been sort of encoded into us socially, or things we've picked up from movies and TV shows, and or sometimes it's just a lack of horizon. We don't really know what we want or what's possible. So we accept what we're given. And if you accept what you're given enough times, you get kind of used to it and you can kind of find a weird kind of pleasure in it. But it doesn't mean it's really the thing that makes your soul sing in any kind of way. And so this is all about self-awareness, right? This is all about insight, contextual awareness, contextual agility. These are the things that I'm always trying to explore on my blog at Midnight Suns and here at The Oldest Magic with any kind of depth. And so, when I talk about things like masculinity and femininity, we all contain elements of these things. And these are just imaginary binaries. These are linguistic tools that allow us to discuss things that are a lot more intangible and a lot more fluid in real life. So, and I think that's part of the problem. It's like sometimes our lack of insight comes from the fact that we are so literal. We fucking literalize everything. We turn everything into these crazy binaries, and we allow no room for nuance or subtlety or gray areas. We don't allow anyone to be correct. You know what I mean? It's like we're not interested in people growing and learning. We just want them to appear to have the correct politics or the correct body or the correct pose or the correct words. It's like, where the fuck did the process go? We want people to be kind with us. We want people to be patient with us. Are we willing to be patient and kind with other people? Are we willing to allow them to grow and kind of cultivate insight? You know what I mean? Because insight, the shadow of insight is blindness, right? Spiritual unawareness. And what happens when you're spiritually blind and unaware? You make mistake after mistake after mistake. You you fall into your addictions again and again and again. You make bad choices again and again and again, and you justify them. You justify your bad sexual choices. You justify your bad health choices. You justify the way you mistreat yourself or the way you mistreat others. You get so good at expressing the right politics, the right words, the right opinions, right? But you're just kind of spieling off a lot of nonsense, and you don't really know how to sort of look inside and apply those things to yourself. And this is not a personal attack, obviously, on anyone, because we all fall prey to this. We are all sort of like trapped in the algorithm now, right? In the 21st century, that gap is getting wider and wider and wider, right? So it's like you're either this or you're that. You're either left or you're right. You're either black or you're white. And our identities are sort of like collapsing into these smaller and smaller micro identities. Tribalism is becoming this kind of like fragmented online culture of these kind of like niche aesthetics, these niche identities. And this is not a place that is a fertile ground for cultivating insight of any kind, right? And so I'm saying this because I know from experience how powerful our pleasure and our pain can be. So we spoke about pleasure, right? Like our romance, our sexual relationships, the way we fuck, the way we expose ourselves and feel either at our most powerful or our most vulnerable with another human being. What makes us feel naked? Even me just using that word, right, kind of makes you feel something, doesn't it? Right? And we kind of project that into our greater lives, our lived awareness, our lived experience. How do we cultivate that insight? How do we hold on to that sense of agency? And I guess that's what I'm trying to say is like through sex, through addiction, through all the things that kind of limit our awareness or get us hooked on dopamine, those things are sort of a cat-handed, fucked up way of trying to reach for a sense of agency, a sense of freedom, a sense of power, a sense of control, a sense of pleasure, right? Because we are running from pain, but sometimes we don't really understand our pleasures, and the depths that sort of drive them. So our pain, what is that? That's the way we're socialized. That's our traumas. That's the abuses that we've been through. That's the unkind words that we were told when we were kids that wounded us so deeply that they stay with us into adulthood, and they kind of shape our inner experience and our inner terrain in some way, and it's like these things happen because the world and our understanding isn't nuanced enough, and we're not really given enough grace, we're not given enough patience, we're not given enough time to be authentic with ourselves. And so we got to do the work ourselves. You know what I mean? We got to figure out what we find sexy and why. We got to figure out who we want to be when the doors close and we're alone. We want to figure out what kind of pain we're running from and how we can sort of stand a little taller, be a little braver, how we can sort of like see equal value in each other, and in the modes of discourse between male and female, because these are all just terms. Like human beings, we are infinitely complex, and reducing everything to this kind of like crazy literalism, which is basically like, it's not even nature versus nurture anymore. It's just politicized bullshit on the internet. You know what I mean? It's like, it has no bearing on real life, any of this. But insight, true insight, is a very slow and delicate and powerful process. And so what I would say is like, go through your life and look at all the people that you really admire, men and women, and why are their words powerful? You know what I mean? If you've had a series of bad relationships, for example, model relationships that are aspirational and seem balanced and coherent and mutually supportive. Forgive me if this was a really kind of messy video, but like I said, I'm recovering from a cold, right? And I've been kind of ill over the holidays. But I've been thinking a lot about insight and just uh, how lonely and how starved of affection and how starved of romance and how starved of passion and how starved of agency I see the world. You know, like men and women, we're so hungry for authenticity. We're so hungry for genuine sexuality. We're so hungry for genuine authenticity. We're so hungry for genuine insight. We so fucking badly want people to see us, to be seen, and to kind of dance in a fun and elegant way with people that we really, really fucking enjoy. That's what we're craving. And the algorithm is like, no, 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 no. You're just going to get facsimile after facsimile, copy after fucking copy after fucking copy. Don't look at any kind of insight. Just consume. Shut the fuck up. Consume. Log on. Talk shit in this endless fucking echo chamber of nonsense. And never really reach for anything real. And if you do reach for something real, make sure it's perfectly curated on the internet, right? But insights, true insight and true quality of life is something so much bigger than that. And I'm saying all of this to say essentially that like we kind of think that we can we have the luxury of making the same mistakes over and over and over and over and over and over again, right? We don't. I'm in my mid 40s and I was lucky enough to be able to learn from my mistakes and kind of like steer myself onto a much brighter path. And I was able to do that because I took the path of insight. I took the power of insight very, very seriously. And my quality of life, my quality of relationships, my quality of friendships, my internal confidence, my sense of self, all of it, everything to do with what makes life good is so much better and so much brighter. And I didn't do it alone. I modeled relationships. I modeled teachers that I admired. I really studied, you know, the masculine and the feminine, for lack of better terms, and how those two things interconnect within myself, within the people I admire, you know, my blind spots, my insecurities. I had a kind of radical honesty about all of it. And it's this kind of radical honesty, this lack of fear of looking inward that allowed me to see like, the devil isn't out there. You know what I mean? The boogeyman is the lack of awareness and the shadow places within my own mind. Yeah, there are fucked up people out there, right? But I'm not going to waste my life projecting onto the outside world. I'm going to cultivate insight about what moves me and what I admire about myself so that I don't project my shadow, onto the world and live through it as fate. I'm aware of my strengths and I can treat people kindly the way that I would like to be treated, and I can move forward. And so I don't have to make those same mistakes again and again and again. And I can save years and years and years and years of suffering. And so, you know what I mean? It's like, that's all I want to say. It's like, don't worry about other people's like literalism and other people's like mercenary attitudes, kind of like hiding behind this mask of like perfect politics and the right words, and the right swag and the right attitudes. And it's like, if you don't have any kind of authenticity with yourself, right, you're fucked. You have basically sealed your fate and you've encased yourself in your own doom, essentially. If you can have a level of honesty and authenticity in yourself in how you move forward, and you move forward with a sense of grace, and you sort of try to genuinely understand other people and understand yourself, and crucially, you're not trying to harm anyone, you're not caught in cycles of control, exploitation. You're not trying to enforce your will onto someone else in order for you to feel powerful, right? Because that's not real power. Real power is about self-control, self-mastery. That's true of the feminine, that's true of the masculine, that's true of everything in between, right? We all exist on a spectrum, and that spectrum is best lived through right practices. And those right practices, we won't get anywhere near them if we don't know the first fucking thing about insight. And so forgive my swear words, but it's like, when you're trying to sort of discuss radical honesty, and you're getting over a bad cold, sometimes you just gotta roll with it and just say what you want to say. And so hopefully, if you're watching this, man, women, however you identify, whatever your sexuality, wherever you are at your stage in your life, however old you are, I hope you kind of sense that I'm saying this with an open heart, and that I want to lift as many people up as possible. And obviously, feel free to disagree with anything that I said. You know what I mean? Nuance, subtlety, gray areas. Let's not go for like obvious literalism and picking apart someone's words because they said one part of one particular sentence in a way that we didn't like. No, let's look at the bigger picture and try and move forward together. Insight is the way to short circuit a future lifetime of pain and confusion. That's essentially what I'm trying to say here. That's what I've learned. So, you don't have to make the same mistakes over and over and over again. You don't have to live in the shadows. You don't have to question your own sanity over and over and over again. Or why am I like this? You can get much closer to a happier and more fulfilling life where you understand yourself on a deep level. You know what I mean? And you might not always be able to control the forces of chaos swirling around outside your mind, outside your skull, but you can have an inner alignment. You can have an inner alignment and a kind of sovereignty over who you are and how you move forward in that kind of storm. And that's basically what I want to convey here today. So, yeah, I hope you got something out of this, my friends, and I wish you all the best for the new year. And I'll speak to you soon. Peace.